All right, good evening and welcome to Motley Crude, your new favorite Warhammer the Old World podcast. We've got a fun episode for you this evening. We'll be talking about this is our pregame show for the Square-based Open Tournament Toronto, which we're all going to be attending over the weekend. But before we get to talking about all that good stuff, how's everybody doing? Starting with you, Ryan.
I've been great. Just been hanging out furiously painting models. And
How's
that's really about it.
how's the army coming along?
I have 17 models left. And when I say left, like they're 75% painted. It's mostly just painting like horse fur and lance wood and like weird shit like that.
Man,
So
if you told me I was going to an event in like 4 days and still had 17 models to paint, I'd probably lose my mind.
it takes me a lot less time than you would think it is because I'm an incredibly lazy painter.
Fair, like fair. Something nobody has said about my painting. I'm definitely like a try hard, go way too far type guy. So uh,
I am cripplingly colorblind.
fair, fair. Yeah, you've told me that before. That makes a lot of sense then. What about you, Andrew? How you doing?
Good. I'm also furiously painting my army to get ready for SBOT. I have 20 witch elves to finish, although they're like 90% done. It's like I just got the final shading done on all the skin. I'm doing um, Vallejo Express color on the hair to make all the crazy colors. And
Nice.
then it's just like skin and eyes, so all the shading's done. Basically, it's just like highlights and everything. I'm hoping I will have enough time to finish the bases. They all have like, I forget the name of the product. I don't have the bottle here in front of me for some reason. It's like that textured paint.
Yeah.
So that's all done. So they at least will look based regardless of if I finish. I don't know if I'll have time to do like all the snow effects and everything, but it'll still look based. So like I'm not too pressed about that. It's more just getting these witches done. And I have 20 of them, so that's
Yeah.
been
So
my day.
almost done though for you too. So that's good news for the both of you.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of this podcast, I'll have it basically done.
Nice. And then so I guess let's just roll into your hobby roundtable there, Andrew, since you've got the since you've got the floor already. Like any games played, anything else you want to highlight over the last few weeks since our last episode?
I forget what I talked about last event. I'm still technically part of the Necromunda campaign that's being held here, but I can't remember if I had a game since then. But my last game was of Necromunda. I played against Orlok crew, and I don't know if I'm gonna play Corpse Grinders after this because their rules seem a little OP, and a lot of my opponents are having difficulty dealing with some of the rules they have that prevents them from basically being attacked. At least like the hero level characters and stuff. So I don't know if it's like a feels bad win, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
my opponents don't really have a chance, and in a game that's already kind of like broken, like these guys seem like a little step too far. So after this campaign, I'm probably going to retire them indefinitely.
Fair. And it's also a little bit more of like a based game than, Old World perhaps is. So if it's just
Yeah,
no
like
fun for anybody, yeah.
like most people go out of their way to not min max, and it's more like your miniatures and your characters in your game. You do what's like cool as opposed to like, oh, this is like the most broken combo ever. And these guys just baseline, at least they're like hero level characters. Like they're just already kind of min max broken.
Sure.
Um so unless like I'm sure my opponents could like super tech against me, but that's not the way like a Necromunda campaign's supposed to go. So it's just like I don't really want to be that guy to push the envelope, and then the whole like local meta, I guess, for this campaign is like shifted in like indefinitely. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total
Uh,
sense.
So yeah, I'm probably gonna retire them soon.
Okay. And then back to you, Ryan. What's new in your hobby aside from the furiously painting an entire army for a tournament this weekend?
Basically nothing. I've just been cripplingly busy with work. I'm getting ready to go away for a little while for work, which means I have to furiously hand over my entire job to another person, which just takes up a lot of my time.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And you're also painting an army on the side. So
Yes, between bouts of hyper focusing on Baldur's Gate 3 for no reason. Um,
well, it's a good game. So on my end, it's been busy hobby time since our last episode. So I did get 2 games in as part of my regular scheduled games in preparation for the tournament this weekend. Played into dwarves twice, so the grudgiest of all grudge matches. So the first game I won pretty handily against Expeditionary Force. Immediately after, we recorded an episode in which I said Chaos Dwarfs aren't a 20-0 faction, and they're like, that never happens. I basically 20-0'd a dwarf guy, so that made me a liar just like 2 days after our last episode, but it is what it is. My opponent just had a number of like atrocious things happen to them right at the start of the game, and then it was just like a really uphill battle for them. So like he failed 3 leadership tests outright on like leadership 9 dwarves or whatever, turn 1 and 2. Had a cannon blow itself up with a reroll turn 1, and it was just like a cascading series of terrible events. And then I played a second game into a grand army of dwarves. It was a real good game. Last episode for Chaos Dwarf Tactics, I mentioned that like cannons were the natural predator of Iron Demons. My Iron Demons got chewed up pretty nicely by a pair of cannons. I lost both of them by the start of turn 3. He did something ridiculous, like 12 damage on his first 4 shots or whatever. So after that was a bit of a hard one for me to come back from, but I did manage to claw my way back up into a draw. So there is that. So 1 win and 1 draw since our last game. I also finished painting all the Hobgoblin crew for my 4 ballistas, of which, as you'll hear later, I will only be taking 3 to this tournament. And I'm now back to working on my Amazon Warband for Mordheim. That one's going to take a little bit more time. I've been painting Chaos Dwarfs for like 10 months straight now, so I'm just happy for a little bit of palette cleansing, and I'll probably do like maybe something historical before I jump into the next big 2,000 point army project. So we'll see. And then finally, I signed up for the SBOT 2.0 online version, so that should be fun too. So before we get into the main topic for tonight, which is obviously the tournament, the GT happening this weekend in Toronto, let's talk about some of the news, Old World related news. There hasn't been very much, but what's been sort of dominating the airwaves has been the Green Knight Gate, or Ban the Green Knight controversy, as we've called it here internally in our chats. So let's talk a little bit about how we feel about the Green Knight. What our experiences have been, how it's worked into our local metas, and then like if you can also touch, guys, on the London Grand Tournament results, because those have also been like super big in the collective zeitgeist of old world players. Green Knight and LGT results. What do you think, Ryan?
I have so many opinions.
Go, man.
So
Go. This
firstly,
is the time. This is the time.
the Green Knight is an interesting beast because, like, yes, is it an objectively powerful model for 275 points? Absolutely. Does he do really annoying things to people who aren't prepared to deal with a 275 point model showing up an inch away from them in a forest in their backfield? Yes. Is he winning games like just by existing? I don't see it, and I don't understand the like aggressive online churn fest of people who think the Green Knight in and of itself is the thing that is winning games for good Bretonian players. Like,
Yeah.
good Bretonian players are, much like any good player, are using the tools that they have to the maximum advantage available to them. But like in the hands of an average or suboptimal player, the Green Knight is just not good. It's very
Yeah.
easy to get put in the wrong spot, into the wrong target. Like, if the enemy has a magic weapon, it's not that durable because ethereal only protects it so much. If you charge a brick of infantry without throwing something else at it, he dies to static combat res. Or when I fought your wyvern and we couldn't hurt each other, but then
Yeah.
I just lose combat by 1 every round until I die.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
like it's a scalpel. Like, it's something you send after war machines, after damaged units. Like, it has a very specific purpose. Um, he also just might not show up for 5 turns.
Yeah.
Like, it's that's where I have issue with the whole discourse going down this rabbit hole of, ban, limit, or nerf the Green Knight because the Green Knight and nothing else, not the Pegasus Knights, not not the men at arms costing half the price of every other infantry unit in the game,
Yeah.
not, dukes. None of those things are defeating your enemy. Just one, you know, ghostly apparition of Gilles Le Breton slaughtering people. Apparently that's all that's happening.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
meanwhile,
It's sure. Go ahead.
for 10 points less, I can have a dude with an unmodifiable 5-up armor save, a 5-up ward save. He can't be multi-wounded. He's on a Royal Pegasus and he has the Frontier Axe. And apparently that is not as threatening, despite having a 360-degree,
Yeah.
19-inch charge range and just decapitating things left, right, and center.
Yeah.
But that's okay. But for 10 points more, having a 3-wound ethereal teleport ghost
Is
from a
worse.
Scooby-Doo episode is is horrifying.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess man, a lot of thoughts on this one too. I guess I'll just jump in and talk about the Green Knight and we can circle back to LGT after just cuz it'll make
Yeah.
for a more a conversation that flows better. So this is also something I've been struggling with, like this whole Green Knight, ban the Green Knight, nerf and whatever controversy. And I'm not sure why it's become such a polarizing piece. Much like you've said, Ryan, he's undoubtedly a good model, but then so is a lot of other stuff in the game. And frankly, Pegasus Knights or the Falcon Horn of I nullify your list design for 40 points are probably worse than the Green Knight in terms of internal and external balance for sure. And probably need to be addressed before that model, as far as I'm concerned. I think the biggest strength of the Green Knight, definitely, and something that I've learned playing against you and another Green Knight player especially, is that it forces your opponent to alter their deployment substantially. And then if you don't, it's going to hurt and it's probably going to be a bad experience depending on how your army's kitted out. But a few items to think about is deploy in a way that makes charging the Green Knight out of terrain just difficult to do. That means, you deploy your army as much as possible away from natural terrain to eliminate or sort of reduce the chance of him pulling off a charge when he comes on the board. He doesn't have Swift Stride, so he's actually not the fastest of all cavalry models out there. In fact, he's one of the slower ones. And then the thing is, the majority of the games played in the old world are still played with player place terrain. So, as a priority, if that happens, you want to make sure you dunk all the natural terrain in places where it's tough to use for your opponent. So you don't deploy your army around a forest, for instance, because that's just a feels bad waiting to happen. And then bring a few magic weapons, for the love of God. If you're in a Green Knight heavy meta, then make sure you're take the Ogre Blade or whatever. Just don't have everybody rocking great weapons and you should be fine. So yeah, I guess that's my take on it. What have your experiences or what are your thoughts, Andrew?
I haven't faced the Green Knight, so I don't really have any visceral feelings about it. I've read his stat lines and stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's a cool stat block and everything, but like there's nothing inherently scary about it um that other armies can't also just deal with. I mean, he's still just a knight. He's still just a single model. Um and honestly, like I feel kind of Ryan touched on this is like you could with these players winning these big GTs, they're good players regardless. So even if they didn't have the Green Knight, that's just 270 points that they're going to spend on something else, probably just as, or if not more nasty in the Bretonian list.
Yep.
So it's like, well, they're winning because of their skill, not because this one model was in their list. Like they'll be fine if that model wasn't in their list, and I think the Green Knight is just an easy target to point at and say like, oh, like this is the problem. This is why these Brett lists are winning is because there's a Green Knight, and it's like, well, not really. It's just good players use the tools they had, like Ryan said. But they probably still would have placed very high or won regardless if the Green Knight was in their list or not.
Yeah, and I think the best proof of that is one of those. I mean, this is a good point for us to circle to the sort of LGT results, because one of those winning lists on the podium didn't have a Green Knight and did apparently completely fine without it. So there's plenty of good options in that book, and I think you're right that it's a fun tool because it brings something different that to the table that the rest of the army doesn't necessarily have. But it's not like a game-winning piece as far as I'm concerned. But as I said, you need to make sure you sort of prepare to face it and deploy in a way that makes sense and stuff. Any closing thoughts on this one, Ryan, before we shift to LGT?
Nope.
All right. So LGT results. I guess I'll go first on this one. So I don't know if you've probably, I'm sure you've both seen, and our listeners are probably aware, the LGT big tournament that happened in London like about 10 days ago, London, UK. The results were interesting, with Bretonians finishing first, second, third, and fourth in the event, and then I think sixth also. So, anyways, in the top like 6 or 7, there were like 5 Bretonians. It was kind of shocking to me, to be frank, at first when I saw it, because obviously this is not the kind of results we've been seeing in our own local meta and at our own events. And the only logical, conclusion I've come up with on this one is that there must be like a vastly different meta out there in the UK than what we're playing here. And then digging through, beyond the headline, digging a little bit through some of the lists and stuff. In fact, there is a completely different meta, I think, or at least in the armies that were represented at that tournament. So, for instance, out of 48 players, there were 8 Wood Elves, which is something that we absolutely never see here. I think there was one at CCBB, for instance, back in late August. And then the highest ranked Tomb King player was 15th or something, which was again pretty shocking for me. Here in our local scene, like Bretonians, I mean, they've done fine, but in our 2 GTs and like our slew of local RTT tournaments, they've never really won anything. And we're very much here in an undead meta. So I would say like Tomb Kings are the king of the roost here, and not necessarily Bretonians.
Hey, I came in
Yeah.
third 3 times.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. You came in third 3 times. Like
After
good.
you and Tomb Kings. Um,
There you go. And then, like, looking at those lists, I don't know, Ryan, like as our sort of as our resident Bretonian player, like I didn't even really find them shocking or like incredible lists. To be honest, it was like this is the run of the mill Bretonian tournament list that I'd expect. So, a bunch of Peg Knights, the Falconhorn, Killy, Monster, Slaying, Flying Duke or Baron, Green Knight, Bombards, Knights of the Realm, a Prophetess, adjust to taste type situation. So I don't know. What are your thoughts as our Brett guy?
yeah, no, like it's. I mean, I'm going to circle back to the UK meta thing first. I am, as with anything, metas develop locally, which makes online discussion get very confusing, because you'll have things hinge on what your good player, like, again, back to the point that good players will be good generally irrespective of what tools you give them, but they
Yeah.
will also gravitate towards things that are stronger. But what I'm seeing, what I think happened in the UK from the discourse, not just around LGT, but just in general, is you have a much larger pool of people that have pre-existing legacy Warhammer Fantasy Battles armies that they are adapting for Old World and bringing out. Whereas here in Ottawa, like easily 50% of the local players started an army just before the Old World or for the purposes of playing the Old World, and they chose those things based on their perceived ability to play the game or faction flavor.
Yeah.
So things like having 8 Wood Elf players. It's not that Wood Elves are necessarily bad, although Wood Elves are like the natural prey of aggressive Bretonians, as I've
Yes.
found out. But what they run into is, you just have some dude that pulls a bunch of Wood Elves from the 90s out of his basement, shows up to an event with his 7 other, woodland friends,
Yeah.
and has a bad time because a bunch of other guys that are pretty good and have been holding on to Bretonian armies for some time between 1992 and 2004
Same
also
models, no
showed up.
change.
Yeah, just also showed up and are like, I'm just gonna shove knights down your throat until you die.
Yeah.
Now, I can't explain the Tomb Kings thing unless the people playing Tomb Kings in the UK are just legitimately taking suboptimal choices,
Yeah.
or people are interpreting how certain rules work in like a wildly different manner than we have here in Ontario.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure what's up with that, but no, like to my point is, as everything develops locally, I don't think LGT is indicative of like a broader Bretonians are the greatest faction in the entire game problem. And I don't think the results of LGT and the results of Nova in any way correlate to each other. Like, yes, Bretonians came in first at both events, but there are so many conditions at both events that were substantially different, including the style of the armies involved and the
Yeah.
comp of Nova, that to like draw a line between two data points and say that it is a trend across an entire set would be horribly disingenuous.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there. Like two radically different events, and it's not like the Nova results are exactly sort. Yes, they won, but it's certainly not to the level that it was at LGT. And I think like Bretts were present. A lot of Bretts were present at CCBB. They didn't wreck the field. Neither did they at CTC here. And I'll go out on a limb here and say that in 5 or 6 days, they're also not going to wreck the field at SBOT in Toronto. So yeah. What about Andrew? What about you? How do you see the results and this our new Bretonian overlords?
Full disclosure, like I haven't really followed the LGT's outcomes that much. I did hear like Brett's took what, like they were in like the top 10 or something, 5 of them.
Yeah, yeah,
But again, mirroring what Ryan said, it's like I think that's just a product of that area's meta. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with available armies as well. So like how many in that tournament, how many Brett players were there total that weren't in the top 10? Like is it just all the Brett players like swept the top? If I had to guess, I would say I doubt it. It's probably, the 5 that won and then, a spread of a couple others down there. So it's not like Brett's inherently just win. They do have a lot of tools that are good, especially in this iteration of the game where cavalry is king, but we're seeing here in our meta that Brett's don't always sweep. And they aren't always like placing super high consistently. Ryan's top 3 not included. Um, so I think it's just a product of that scene as opposed to like an overall trend. And if you compare it to like other sort of larger events that did happen, um, Nova and LGT are just two events out of like what one that happens every month at this point, and Brett's
Sure.
aren't sweeping every event. So it's like, again, this is like an easy thing to point at and be like, oh, look, Brett's, but it's only two events. And I just don't see them that much stronger than like everyone else, except for maybe some of the legacy factions.
Yep. Nope. That makes sense. Sorry, Ryan, you wanted to say something? Okay.
I was just
Okay.
breathing.
Okay, fair. No, so that makes total sense, Andrew, and I think you're completely right. There's like a local meta reality, which if you're at home and you're losing your mind over the possibility of getting run over by Bretts all the time, like reality is, as Andrew and I think Ryan have both pointed out here, your local meta is probably completely different, and that's not going to be happening where you are. So all right, I think we've beat this horse to death. So let's shift to our main segment. Let's talk about the Square-based Open Toronto that's happening this weekend. Andrew, you want to start with giving us the basic details surrounding the event?
Yeah, so this is a 2-day, 5-game event happening in Toronto. It's run by Val from the Square-based podcast, with some help from some local tournament organizers. It's 2,000 points, rule of 3, and it's using the Square-based internal FAQ that they put out for all the events that the other co-host on the show, Rob, uses in his events in the UK. That's about it, the general breakdown. I do believe they're using an iteration of Rob's terrain placement map. So for his events, um, instead of having player place terrain, he has a series of maps for each scenario, and it's sort of like a blind choice of what map you're going to use in your game, and that'll determine like where every piece of terrain is placed. And for the most part, the maps are like equally mirrored on both sides. So realistically, no matter what map you use, you'll have the same pieces of terrain that your opponent has in your deployment zone or like in the center of the board and stuff. Now, they did modify this a bit because they're using my terrain from CCBB for the majority of the tables, and I have an odd number of terrain and a different spread of terrain pieces that are be used on the maps. So I think the standard ones that Rob uses in the UK, it's like 2 forests, 2 trees, or sorry, 2 forests, 2 hills, 2 buildings or line of sight blockers. Mine is 1 difficult, 1 low linear obstacle, 1 line of sight blocker, which is usually a building, and then 2 hills, 2 forests. So they've just modified their maps to be used with my terrain sets.
Awesome.
I don't
So,
think
how many tables of terrain are you lending to the event?
40.
Okay, so it's primarily our Ottawa local terrain that's going to be at the event then.
Yeah, so all the Ottawa guys have a bit of an advantage because they've played on the terrain before, although it will be set up different than we do because we still just do like player placed.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that later, like in the episode, how we see that. But awesome. Good stuff. So, Ryan, how are you feeling about the event in general?
I'm pretty excited. It's been a while since I've been out of town. So it's actually been years since I've traveled for an event, any game system. So that'll be fun. Nice to meet other people, be in Toronto, etc. So I'm quite excited. I've been looking forward to this since Val announced it during the summer. Um, so it'll be nice.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to repeat your comments about being out of town with the boys because my wife is working not far away, and I need to make it sound like I'm not happy at all to be leaving the house for a weekend. But on my end, I'm also really happy to be just heading out to another like major event. Right, I wasn't able to unfortunately make our last two RTTs here in Ottawa because life caught up to me and I was double booked for some stuff. So this will be my first like official event since CCBB. Super, pumped for that. And there seems to be a lot of like hype surrounding this tournament in the greater community, which is fantastic. The WhatsApp group that they built for the event is like the attendees is popping and people are excited. So I think it's just going to be a lot of fun. And then on your end, Andrew, how does it feel to be actually playing at an event rather than running it for once?
I haven't really thought about it so much because I've been kind of hyper focused on just rushing to get everything painted. So for me, it's mostly just stress because I'm like, oh man, I gotta get this done before this event. And I haven't really thought about the actual day of being there. But like if I think about it now, like I am pretty excited to go. And it'll be nice to see. Like I always like seeing other people use my terrain and see if they like it, and like I can get some good feedback on if I need to adjust things and stuff. So that's gonna be a cool additional stress test for like all the work I've done on that terrain, in a different atmosphere than like an event I'm running myself,
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
usually people are a little more inclined to say nice things because they
You're
know
the
me and
TO.
I'm running the event. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
the TO, whereas like there I'm just gonna be another player. So it'll be interesting. But I'm pretty excited.
awesome. And then I guess like we've got some pretty good Ottawa representation going down. Where the three of us are going. I think Andrew, Danny, Cleary, and perhaps another guy are going down. So we're going to be like 6 players, I
I thought
think.
it was. Didn't the other guy have to drop? If we're
Oh
talking
yeah, it's
about Nick.
possible. Oh yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Okay, so maybe we're
Dark,
just 5.
Dark, Darko's going.
Yeah, Darko
Oh,
is
Decker.
going for
Okay.
sure.
All right on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Darko's going, but mine and Darko's mutual friend is had to drop.
Okay.
Brutal.
So still 6 guys out of Ottawa is pretty good. Um, all right. So shifting a little bit, I think you guys have looked at the lists and at the player representation at least somewhat. Ryan, what does the overall representation for the event look like?
Okay, so for clarity, there's 55 people signed up. I can only find 49 lists.
Okay.
But here's what we got so far. We got 10 Warriors of Chaos, of which at
Gross.
least one is Wolves of the Sea with like 10 ambushing units in it.
Love it.
We have 2 Dark Elves. We have 6 Tomb Kings. One of them's a royal host for sure. I saw at least 3 mortuary cults. I think it's actually more than that. We got 2 orcs and goblins, one of which is a troll horde army. We have
Is that Darko?
10. Yeah,
Yeah, it is
Darko's
Darko.
trolls. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then we got 10 high elves, of which at least 5 are like double dragon plus cavalry. It's just kind of an archetype. Or just like 20 to 30 Sea Guard plus stuff.
Yeah.
We got 6 Kingdom of Bretonia that I believe are evenly split between exiles and not exiles. Not gonna lie, they're all broadly similar lists. I think mine is the most cavalry-y of them, insofar as I don't have any like ranked infantry. There are 3 Beastmen armies. I haven't read any of them. There is Danny's Demons, because Danny. There are 2 ogres. There is 1 vampire count army, and it is not going to scream you to death, but it is just going to not die. Like,
All the zombies.
good God.
Yeah.
There are 2 dwarf armies, one of which is the like all slayers YOLO army with like 1,000 points of point denial. There's 1 lizardman army, 2 Chaos Dwarfs, and 1 Empire Army. And the Empire Army has a lot of curious choices.
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
state troops.
Well, and like 24 great swords.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
Yikes.
yeah. Yeah, I did see that.
And like a captain on foot with a pistol.
Nice. There you go.
But yeah,
Awesome.
so that's 49 out of 55 players. I have no idea what the other 6 are.
Yeah, we'll probably see them. I know sooner or later. I think there's only one list that was unsubmitted last I checked, so I don't know. Might be
Yeah.
some error or whatever. Yeah, I guess like just jumping in here, my my initial thoughts. Like I was super surprised to see the prevalence of high elves at this event, and to a lesser degree, warriors of chaos. No wood elves and like 50 players is also a surprising event. And then so few orcs and goblin lists. I know they're one of the most popular factions in general, and also super competitive too. Is also like an interesting fact. I guess I pulled up some let's call them advanced statistics over lunch today, and so I think half of the lists are taking a dragon or equivalent. It's not unexpected. Slightly surprising. I thought maybe it would be more. Maybe it's self-policing, or maybe the people online talking about the dragon meta are not entirely correct. Because at like one of our largest competitive events, nearly half the players aren't taking them or any equivalent. So there's that. And then some fun facts for you guys. Like, get ready to face some dragon ogres. I counted 20 separate units of dragon ogres across the tournament. I'm including Shaggoths in this. Full disclosure. So there is that, which will be fun. And then Brett players were also pretty tame on the Peg Knights. I think most I've seen like across the list is like 2x3, 2 units of 3 Peg Knights, or 1 unit of 5 or 6, which is actually not all that bad. Like I've seen way worse in other events. So there's that. And then just interestingly, over 20 players have each taken the ruby ring as well as the talisman of protection. So when 40 plus when these 2 items show up more than 40 times across 50 lists, then they're probably not expensive enough, is what I would say. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. How are you feeling about the representation, Andrew?
It's weird to see so many high elves. Just because, like, I get it with warriors, because the availability of warriors, even if, I mean, they've just dropped, but even like leading up into the event, like you could use Slaves to Darkness and stuff. So I find like at least locally, like our meta is kind of dictated by what's available. That's why we have like a lot of Tomb Kings players, and even like starting out, I know a few of them have dropped off, but there was a lot of Bretonians. But that's just because what was available. And I kind of feel like that might be the same in other metas, at least in North America. So it's weird to me that there's so many high elves, because it's like, well, where the hell are they getting all these high elves if they're not 3D printing them?
Yeah,
They're 3D printing them.
There's
they
not
very
that
well
many
could be.
cool like high elf 3D prints though. Like even the Lost Kingdom miniatures, I don't like that much. So I don't know. It's kind of strange to me. As a Dark Elf player, I love it, and I hope I play all high elves all weekend, because then I'll just have hatred against everything. Uh,
Nice. I hadn't
I'm
even
not.
considered. Yeah, you're set up, man.
Yeah, I'm like the counter meta, I guess, for this event.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, like I don't know, it seems kind of like a normal spread, other than warriors and high elves. Like you got a few beastmen, empire players. There's usually that one guy. Um, you said there's no orcs and goblins, but technically the troll
Two
horde
only.
is
There's only two.
two only.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like out of 40 players, it seems like the spread's kind of okay, other than those two like huge outliers. It's nice to see another dark elf player coming out of the woodworks too.
Yeah, and no wood elves. So dark elves are overtaking wood elves now.
I guess so.
Yeah. Okay, so we've already sort of talked about this, but Andrew, I'll go right back to you. But how do you think the meta for this event differs from what we've seen here locally?
Well, there's a lot of high elves and warriors, so it seems like there's gonna be a lot of, I guess, higher armor saves. Like you said, a lot of the high elf lists are dragons and cav, so 3-up saves, and big monsters, and a stupid amount of dragon ogres, which I'm not looking forward to facing.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot of
again,
one
like
dragon ogre.
Sorry, what
I
was
mean,
that,
if
Ryan?
I was,
It's a lot of single dragon ogres.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if I was gonna run dragon ogres, that's how I do it too. Just like super heavy chaff, sort of that can handle itself. I mean, at least that's how I hope to do it with my Beastmen list. It'll just be like a lot of one-off dragon ogres, but that's beside the point. So yeah, I don't. I have a hard time commenting on metas because like I usually don't think about that while I'm playing or even when like going to a tournament. I usually don't pay attention to what everyone else is bidding because I'm more focused on making sure my list is tuned in a way that I feel comfortable with what I'm using and I feel that I can try and handle any obstacles that are put in my way with my list and try not to worry too much about everyone else. um so yeah, other than those two like big spikes of warriors and high elves, like I don't really have any strong opinions on the meta. Like it just seems kind of normal to me.
Sure. And what about you, Ryan?
I basically coming from the same spot as Andrew. Like this looks very cosmopolitan to me. Basically, is like Toronto. It's very central, very accessible. You're looking at the demographic coming to the event. It's like sections of the GTA meta, the Barrie meta, the Ottawa meta, the Niagara meta, the London, Kitchener, etc. Some people from upstate New York. I think the Lizardman player is the same guy from Vermont that came up for CCBB, etc. Like you're getting cross sections of a whole bunch of different areas, and then when you jigsaw those together, that's where you wind up with these like super weirdly high numbers of different things. But yeah, like if this was in Ottawa, there'd be like way more dwarves. Um, like probably more Tomb Kings and Bretonians,
Yeah.
etc. But and significantly less Warriors of Chaos. Like I don't know where all of these Warriors of
And
Chaos are
high elves. And high
from.
elves. Yeah,
And there'd be just Chris and his high elves.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I,
just weird.
Yeah, I guess on my end it's like the field couldn't be more different than what we've seen here locally, as you guys have pointed out. Essentially nobody in our scene, like one or two players run high elves, and then to a lesser degree Warriors of Chaos we also don't see very often. And then I think as Andrew pointed out, like orcs and goblins we see way more of here, so it is completely different. Our meta here, as I mentioned before, is very much undead dominated. Then with like a large sprinkling of Bretonian players, so this is going to be interesting to see a completely different faction roster show up to the event there. So yeah, those are my thoughts. And then moving on a little bit, Ryan, what are your how do you see, like, looking at the lists? What are the vibes you're getting? Is it more of is it a bunch of tryhards like us bringing the spiciest shit that they can find to the table, or are you just getting a lot of
Hey,
lists
hey
that
now,
you're?
you speak for yourself.
Okay,
I would
fair
say
enough.
I'm bringing
I
dark
resent
elves.
the
How am I a tryhard with dark elves, bud?
I resent the accusation of trying hard with my 12 mounted yeomen.
Okay, okay,
Um, but anyway, to your question,
yeah,
it seems to be kind of an even split between like there's a lot of samey high elf lists here where very clearly like that has a cadre of people that are trying to do something
yeah,
because like monkeys on a typewriter is not going to spit out 2 dragons plus 10 reavers plus 10 silver helms plus 10 dragon princes plus
Yeah.
sisters of Avalorn 5 times.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's a deliberate choice.
Or
The
or
chaos.
somebody's been like killing all the events on their local scene with that list, and everybody's rocking it now.
Hey, at least
I
silver helms
think
don't have countercharge.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, Andrew.
I think you're wrong there though. I see. So I think high elves are kind of in the same boat as dark elves, where they have a lot of options, but only few are like sort of quote unquote like the good ones. And I feel like the high elf cav dragon list is kind of the list for that faction, where it's like, okay, the infantry, if it was an infantry centric game, would be pretty good, but cav kills it before they can do all their fancy like tricks like sword masters, phoenix guard, and the other ones, the white lions. Like
yeah,
if they're able to fight, they're amazing. But usually a cav will hit them, they lose their front rank, and it's over. So the option is silver helms and dragon princes. And then you put your lord and your mage on a big fucking dragon, and there you go. There's your list.
but
And I
okay,
feel unless you're doing like dark elves are in the same boat, where it's like you kind of want the dragons because the black dragons are amazing, and then you either go all avoidance or you go sort of like all cav with dark riders, cold one knights, and like whatever big gribbly monster you want to add in. So
but
I feel
I
like
guess
high
what
elves are shoehorned into that one like kind of archetype if you're trying to play competitive.
I agree with you. I guess what I'm getting at about my argument that the cadre of samey high elves people are going to be some of your more competitive players, because the odds
For
that
sure.
all of these people just had 2 dragons and 40 cavalry lying around in their basement since 2014 is not high. So
Yeah.
like these were
Yeah, for
deliberate
sure.
choices these people made to acquire these armies and play them in this event. Um, but yes, I agree with you in principle that like there's only so many ways that high elves work, which is why I haven't started them, because I haven't been able to make an army that I actually enjoy the concept of playing.
Yeah. It'll just be Bretts with dragons, basically.
Yeah. And then at the same time, like looking at a whole bunch of things, but you also definitely have people that just brought like, I think this is cool, like the Slayer army. Like it, yes, if your opponent is an idiot, um, you can do very, very bad things to people with that Slayer army. But at the same time, your 1,000 points of point denial that's tied up in like 4 characters that are literally just kind of ignorable,
Yeah.
um, is also not going to like win the game for you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's more one of the themey lists definitely out there, and big props to I think Jeffrey's the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on my end, there are some themey lists for sure, like the one you just mentioned. But I would say that there's like a solid 30 plus lists that are packing some of the pretty scary stuff. And I think that mid table upwards, it's going to be like a pretty nasty sharks tank out there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of there's some spicy stuff. There's some spicy stuff. What about you, Andrew?
Um, what was the question?
And, like, what's the vibe you're getting from the lists? Is it like top tier competitive
Oh,
stuff? You're
yeah,
getting a
yeah.
lot of yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm really bad at like saying if something's competitive or not. Like there's choices in the list that kind of give me pause on like how am I gonna deal with that, you know. Dragon Ogres, one of them being a running a low toughness army that
Yeah.
doesn't have that much armor. Like I'm kind of worried about things like that. Dragons obviously I'm gonna struggle with. Even the dwarves, like I gotta pick my fights right. So I think there's good lists out there. But I I always play each game as it comes, so like I can't really predict and be like, oh, like
Sure.
that list is trash or like that list is really good because it's like, well, it also depends on how the person's playing, so it's hard for me to look at a list and be like, oh, well, these things are bad, and then I'm gonna roll up against it and they completely like table me because I just thought the list was bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
no, fair.
like there's things in these lists that I'm worried about, and like overall I think like there's like everyone's kind of coming out playing competitively. Like there's not, I know the Slayer army, even you're saying like, oh, that's pretty fluffy, but I'm sure that player probably has a lot of experience with it. At least like the book's been out, what, 4 months now, 3 months.
Yeah.
So obviously something's working with that list for them to be like, well, I'm gonna bring it to like a big kind of more hardcore tournament, right? So I think it's more of those guys you're gonna have to worry about with like the weird list where you're like, whoa, why the fuck are they coming with that? It's probably because they have some weird trick up their sleeve that's gonna work.
Fair. Fair. So I think this is like a good segue for us to talk about specific lists. So anything you all want to highlight about lists that you've read. So I think I'll jump in first here because it might sound like we're picking poor Jeffrey Chu there with his All Slayer list, but I definitely want to highlight that one. I love the theme. I'm happy to see someone running it. It's something that Ryan and I have discussed as being like just a really cool idea before the book came out. So I'm super there for it. I hope it does well, and I'm going to pray that you don't run into a solid gun line because that will be a difficult time for that army. And then the other one I want to highlight is double level 4 Volatile Caster list by Daniel Brzezowski. Like, hide your dragons and your T6 monsters, everyone, because in I think a meta that's got quite a few of those T6 bad boys running around, that could do some damage too. So what about Andrew? What on your end? Any lists you wanna highlight?
No, he kind of took mine. It was the Slayer list.
Awesome.
I think it's cool. And I hope he does well.
Awesome. And what about you, Ryan?
Not gonna lie, like I like the things that stand out. So again, the Slayer list is cool. The kind of more offbeat, like the Tomb King Royal Host Army, things like that. Like when I'm scrolling through all the lists right now, and it's like, oh look, another guy with a dragon and 20 warhounds,
Yeah.
and some chosen knights. Like, okay, cool. He will do probably as well as the other 5 guys that have that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, I like to see offbeat things, and I really do buy into Andrew's point that like when you show up with weird stuff, it's like that time that another podcast said that Danny was either a genius or a moron.
Yeah. Fair.
Like
Turns out it's
so
both.
exactly. Like I hope Danny does well. I absolutely love Bob the Bloodthirster, and I hope he, takes many skulls for corn.
Sure.
So that's where I'm at.
Ryan, we should also probably shout out the lone Wolves of the Sea player, as we're both guys who've bought
Oh yeah,
Wolves of the Sea army. So
that man's army is my spirit animal. If my spirit animal was a skin wolf.
yeah, so I forget your name, buddy. Sorry, but like happy to see somebody rocking that list too at an event. Okay, so let's pivot to our own armies and what we're bringing to the table. So Ryan, why don't you start by running us through the broad lines of your army?
God, I need to remember what's in my army. Okay, so it's Bretonian Exiles, and it has a Baron on a Royal Pegasus with the Frontier Axe and the armor of silvered steel. Um, one second. He has those things, and anything that remotely sounds like a knight in this army has the Exiles vow, and then he
Sure.
has the virtue of knightly temper, as well. so he's getting on the charge. He's getting hatred and plus D3 attacks with his Frontier Axe, which is a great time. Then we have a damsel. She's level 2 with battle magic and the flame strike wand. She's going to hang out with my archers because surprisingly, people don't expect magic archer peasants to be a thing. And then my outcast wizard, level 3, he has elementalism, the prayer icon of Quenelles, and the falcon horn of Fredimund, and he is on a warhorse. He's going to run around with some mounted yeomen and, do some 27-inch dispels and turn off fly. Then we have 2 units of 6 mounted knights of the realm with full command. They just form triangles and charge stuff. And 2 units of 6 mounted yeomen with shields and light armor and feigned flight and full command because they're peasants and their standards don't do anything. The cool thing about these is that they're basically cheaper knights errant that aren't impetuous. Like they have functionally the same effect, but they do like 25 more Swiss Army knife things.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Then we got 12 peasant bowmen in skirmish formation with a villain because I had to spend 7 points.
Sure.
We have, like, I really don't care about the one peasant that has like +1 ballistic skill.
Yeah, he's there to take a challenge, basically.
If that happens, I'm just impressed. I mean, he did
Yeah,
kill a silver
They've
helm.
already lost if they're taking challenges.
He killed a silver helm in close combat at CCBB.
There you go.
It's the moral
The standard
victory.
is set. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Then we have 5 Pegasus Knights with full command and the banner of the Zealous Knight for a lovely pre-game Vanguard move. So, the obvious play here is that 5 Pegasus Knights and the Baron just like jam themselves into someone's face, which we'll talk about later, but courtesy of Val's deployment choices,
Yeah.
will be a frequent occurrence.
Yes.
Then we have 2 units of 5 squires with fire and flee and scouts and a musician, just to do typical, like impetuous frenzy baiting things.
Sure.
2 bombards and my favorite unit, 10 brigands with blunderbusses, ambushers, skirmishers, and a desperado armed with the ruby ring of ruin. So when they do show up, and I will remember to actually roll for them for most of my games this time, just random fireball coming from the backfield for good times.
Fun.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's my army.
Love the list. Over to you, Andrew. What's your list look like?
So I'm taking a Dark Elf Dreadlord on a Black Dragon. He's equipped with a Sword of Might, the Pendant of Kaleth, which is a Dark Elf specific magic item. Basically, it's a 5-up save against anything strength 4 or less, and a 5-up a 5-up ward save against anything strength 4 or less, and a 4-up ward save against anything strength 5 or more. He has just a shield, and that's it for him. I have a level 4 sorceress on a Pegasus with the Talisman of Protection, a lore familiar so I can pick my spells. She took battle magic, which is the one thing that I kind of flip-flopped in my list the most in the lead up to the event, was which magic lore to take. Normally I take Demonology like almost exclusively, but this time I wanted to try something different. Since she is so mobile, I figured maybe she can act as more of like a very mobile gun. So I'm gonna I'll probably always take Fireball with her and Vortex.
Pillar of Fire. Yeah.
Pillar of Fire, that's the one. And just have her like blasting the whole game. And she also has it's not Arcane Familiar. Let me bring up my list right quick. I'm just kind of doing this off the top of my head. It's a magic item that the Dark Elves have that allows her to place a token a foot out from her, and instead of her spells being cast through her, once per game it can be cast through that token instead.
Nice.
And it is called it is the Focus Familiar. Okay, cool, right on.
Sure.
And then I have a Death Hag. She has the Ogre Blade and the Rune of Cain, which allows her to have an additional D3 attacks instead of +1 due to Frenzy. And she unlocks the Witch Elves as core instead of special. So in core, I have 20 Witch Elves, full command, and the Banner of Harganeth, which is a +1 to their armor piercing. And it's not armor bane, it's straight up +1 to their armor piercing. They are frenzied with 2-hand weapons and poison attacks. And then I have 2 squads of 5 Dark Riders with a musician, the Herald, who is the champion, cavalry spears, repeater crossbows, light armor, and shields. And then I've paid to upgrade them to both have fire and fleet and the scout special rule as well. I have a Cold One Chariot, a Charybdis, and then 6 Cold One Knights with full command, and the Standard of Slaughter, which gives them plus D3 combat res on the charge. So
Awesome.
that's my list. Basically, my plan is to play a little KG. Unless there's a lot of shooting across the board, I'll probably either not move up very far the first turn or two, and let my opponent kind of come forward, and hopefully they'll make a mistake. At that point, I will just kind of rush everything forward. The Dark Riders are very mobile, so they could, be anti-chaff with their shooting, or try to do that cheeky scout across the back of the field and, get to war machines and things like that. One of them will probably have to be on blocking duty for the Frenzied Witch Elves, so they don't just start going crazy all over the board.
Yep.
The cold ones hit very hard, so I'll probably keep them back and act as like a second. They'll like bail out other combats. The dragon he's kind of
A dragon.
self-sufficient. Yeah, he's self-sufficient. He can go do what he wants. He's pretty defensive. Just due to points, I had to take the Sword of Might, so at least he has magic attacks and he's strength 5. I was flip-flopping between just giving him like a great weapon, but I felt that he needed magic attacks, and that was the only points that I could fit with like a decent magic weapon. And strength 5 isn't that bad, so whatever. The Charybdis is kind of crazy. He either does like amazing or gets shot off the board because he is only strength or toughness 5. But he has 1 killing blow attack and then a bunch of poisoned strength 7 AP2 attacks. He has D3 stomps, and he has a bubble that every enemy model within 6 inches of him is -1 leadership. So he's good for supporting other combats as well. And with his leadership debuff, as well as being causing terror. So usually in combats, your opponent is already like a -2 to their leadership before they have to take any tests, which usually helps push it into the realm of them just straight up fleeing as opposed to like falling back in good order.
Yeah.
So he's really nice, and then the chariot's kind of just chaff. It's basically all I had painted, so I put it in. I mean, it's not like a bad model. It has some shooting out of it. They have 2 repeater crossbows, the crew, and it does hit pretty hard. And weirdly enough, even when it gets charged, it just sticks around forever. Like, I don't know. My opponents always have a hard time killing it, even though like it's not that tough, but I don't know. So I took it, and that's about it. Not much to say about the army. It's kind of just straightforward.
Sure. On my end, so we did a whole last episode on what I thought about Chaos Dwarfs, essentially. So I'll be able to spare a lot of the tactical insight for this one. My list is quite similar to the CCBB list I ran. So basically, 3 hero or characters in the army. So we've got a Sorcerer Prophet on foot, level 4 caster, Elementalism as the general. I've got a Black Orc War Boss on Wyvern. I thought, like you, Andrew, whether or not I was going to give him a magic weapon, hemming and hawing, based largely on the Green Knight talk, I decided against it, and I'm happy that I did go with the Great Weapon on him. Just made him very survivable as per usual. Then the third character is a Hobgoblin on Great Wolf, a Hobgoblin Con on Great Wolf, with the Ruby Ring of Ruin. He's like the lone operator that just runs around being annoying, casting fireballs behind people's lines, a little bit like your Desperado does there with your Brigands, Ryan, but definitely more mobile. So for my core slot, I've got 2 units of 13 Infernal Guard with great weapons. So they're strength 6 effective when they're attacking. They've also got shields. I have also a unit of 5 Black Orcs just to sort of be a little bit of a utility piece, again with great weapons, and stubborn in their case also. So that covers my core slot. And then after that, I have 2 Iron Demons. Never leave home without them. Upgraded, of course, to be Hellbound. So they have Terror, Ward Save, that kind of stuff. Magical attacks. Magical shooting is great. And then finally, I have 3 Hobgoblin Bolt Throwers to round things out. So that's my list. Since I'm speaking, I guess I'll just continue on here with the changes I've made over my last few games, and especially since CCBB. So basically, I've reduced the size of my Hobgoblin Wolf Rider wing. So I really enjoyed the mobility of the unit and the utility that they brought to the army. But Hobgoblin Wolf Riders are a little bit matchup dependent. They're extremely fragile, and they certainly were not earning their points back most games, or basically all games. I know that's not exactly their point there, but it is what it is. I exchanged them for 3 bolt throwers. I think they're great value for points. You guys know my opinions by now. I think they're the best artillery piece in the army, unfortunately. And then, the issue that I was trying to correct with that is, my army has some really strong mid-range shooting from the Iron Demons, especially, and a little bit of magic. But I wanted to get some long-range support in. I ran into a few matches which where the enemy had some long-range guns and I didn't, and they outranged my Iron Demons, and that was a bit awkward and problematic. As the Chaos Dwarf player, you don't want to have to run to your enemy, so hopefully the bolt throwers kind of fix that. Originally, I had 4 bolt throwers on my list, as you guys have heard me bitch and complain about over the last few weeks. However, and I had 4 because the army composition says 0 to 2 per 1,000 points. And unfortunately, the tournament pack stated that it was either army composition or the rule of 3, whichever is the lowest. So that left me with a 45-point hole in my list, which I just spent 2 weeks hemming and hawing about over, which magic item I was going to take to fill that 45-point delta, because there's nothing really in a Chaos Dwarf list that you want to take for 45 points. So aside from a bolt thrower, so that's it. Those are the big changes to my list lately. Andrew, I know you didn't play at CCBB. You were obviously TOing, but what are some of the latest changes you've made to the army as you've played it over the last few weeks/months?
So I already touched on the first one. That's switching away from demonology, my first love, to trying out battle magic. And that choice was just based on I want my wizard to do something different rather than just kind of be a support unit for the other blocks of infantry and the knights. The other change is normally I would take my sorceress with a magic carpet, and that way she can kind of hide out next to the witches and avoid being singled out from long range shooting and stuff. This time though, I went with the peg, which is something I haven't used before, but I guess the idea would be she's still super mobile. And it freed up more points for me to buy the magic item spread that she has now, because the flying carpet uses up part of my magic item allowance. Other than that, this is kind of just the same list I've been running for the past, I don't know, half a year.
Sure. So you're super familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it, and realistically, I'm comfortable with the tactics. I'm sure my first few games with the sorceress being more of a blaster as opposed to a buffer and debuffer piece is probably going to have some. It's probably going to get me a few games to kind of get used to that fact. But realistically, I haven't really had time to test my list due to work and painting.
Sure. Ryan, what about you? Any big, what are the latest changes you've made since CCBB?
All I did was drop the questing nights, which they were amazing in exactly one game, and then otherwise just terrible. I dropped them, which then let me put armor on my mounted yeomen, who were surprisingly survivable being unarmored. So now having a 5-up save should be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And bump my damsel up to level 2. But like other than like some tweaks to the Baron's war gear, the and virtue, the list is fundamentally the exact same thing that I brought last time.
Fair. I guess being skirmish fast cav there makes armor kind of superfluous, and you're just survivable by the fact that nobody can target you.
Reserve move. It's the greatest
Reserve
rule
move
in the
also,
entire
yeah.
game.
Yeah. Fair. Okay, cool. So this is so those are our latest changes. Let's move on to our hopes and dreams for the event. So let's kick off with Andrew. Like, what are you hoping to achieve? What are you going for? Top player, podium? Like, what's the goal here?
I'm gonna be realistic. I'm not the most amazing player out there, so if I can go at least 2-3, I think I'll be happy. 2 wins, 3 losses. Yeah, that's basically all I'm hoping for.
I think that's super achievable. Like, you've got a good list, and yeah, I think you can win 2 games easy. You get my vote of confidence.
Thanks, buddy.
On my end, I'd like to go first legacy faction player at the event. Or top legacy faction player. I had the same goal at CCBB. I almost managed it. I came in second. And could have been there. Had the same overall result as the player who went first. So I'd be happy with that. And otherwise, a 4-1 feels kind of like an achievable record. So we'll see. What about you, Ryan? What are you going for?
I mean, like, internally, I want to go for 3-2, but I also have a really bad habit of just like bouncing off of Chaos Warriors.
Yeah.
Like literally just like charge them and do nothing and die. So, I'm aiming for 3-2, but I'm not, like gonna be upset if it's not that.
Yeah, like Chaos is not the easiest of matchups for Brett's for sure, given like essentially any high toughness, high resiliency army that you can't break on the first charge is a bit of a rough go. So
On the plus side, I can kill warhounds for days, and there's plenty of those.
You got this. You got this.
Just 36 points at a time.
Yeah,
pretty
exactly. Exactly. And you're so that's good. And then Ryan, how are you feeling about running into the event? Like in terms of running your list, I know you've played it a lot. How's your prep been going? Have you gotten any reps in lately? That kind of stuff.
No, so I've got between CCBB and now, I had 1 game on Warhol.
Okay.
Just because of scheduling, it's just been a nightmare for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So mainly just, and this is one of the reasons I didn't deviate much from my previous list, because I can at least run off of like muscle memory at this point on a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten definitely more practice games in since CCBB, but a little bit like you, I'm feeling pretty comfortable because I've run this list a ton or a variation of it. I mean, I changed about 150 points of my army since CCBB, but despite that, I've run bolt throwers a ton earlier on in the edition or when the game came out, so I'm pretty comfortable handling them. So yeah, despite that, I mean, I missed our latest 2 RTTs, but I've been putting in the reps still, at a pretty good pace. So I like my prep going into this. I'm not overly worried. What about you, Andrew?
Well, I already said I haven't had time to get any reps in. I guess my last game was the RTT I ran at Multi-Zone last month.
Yeah.
I stepped in for one game because one of the players had to drop out. Um, and even without that many games, like my list has basically been unchanged for the past whatever 6 months. So I've had enough games with this list, or at least a very close iteration of it, that I'm fairly confident with, what it does. I know its strengths. I know the matchups or the units that I'm gonna have to worry about when playing it. And realistically, like most of the time, I'm my own worst enemy when playing. So for me, like I said, I like to my usual plan going into a game is I try to sit back and let my opponent come to me so I could react better to what units are coming across the board. But oftentimes, once I get into a game, I might get a little impatient and then just start pushing stuff forward, and that's usually what gets me.
So you are your own worst enemy there, and trying to rein yourself
Most
in.
of the time,
Yeah,
yeah.
fair.
So I just gotta be patient.
Okay, cool. So, okay, we've been over our lists, our hopes and dreams. Let's talk about some of the probably more contentious items. So, tournament pack, FAQ, scoring, mission pack, all that kind of stuff. So let's start with one that we haven't seen locally. The battle ready standard, sorry, on the armies, which is something that we haven't done here in Ottawa for any of our events. Especially having 2 TOs or at least 1 TO and a supporter here on the group. Like, how do we feel about that? I mean, for my part, like everybody else, I like to see painted armies on the table. Like, I mean, it looks good. That's all fantastic, and it's definitely part of the experience. I guess my initial reaction was, we shouldn't prevent people from playing the game so early on in its life cycle due to painting requirements. I mean, both of you guys are dealing with, I've got to get this army ready for the tournament, basically full time as far as your old world hobby time goes. So I guess I was a little bit against that personally. That being said, I guess almost all the tickets have sold out, so it doesn't seem to have hurt the event in any way, shape, or form. So it shows how much I know. I guess I don't have super strong feelings, but I guess overall, I'm a little bit against the early on in the life cycle going for this battle ready standard of painting. What about as our resident TO, Andrew? How do you see that bit?
At this point, like the game came out in January, we're now, mid-October. I think it's fine, especially for an event of this size and caliber. I think it's not unreasonable for them to ask to have fully painted armies at this point. If it was like earlier in the game's lifespan or, an RTT, maybe I'd have something more spicy to say, but, like realistically, like you should be able to have an army painted in 8 months. The reason I haven't is because I lost like 4 or 5 months to making terrain for CCBB,
Fair.
which all would have like I would have had this army painted long before now had I not
Mhm.
had to do that. Um, and realistically, like a lot of the armies aren't that hard to paint. Warriors, Bretonians, it's all just armor and horses. So I don't know. I'm fine with it. Um, yeah.
Okay, and fair. Do you think you're gonna go with battle ready standard for like CCBB next year, or maybe a team
Oh yeah,
tournament also?
100%. So, even in our like players pack this year, it even said like you don't need to have fully painted armies, but this year only. So going forward after this year, like we will have um battle ready being part of the pack. This year was just sort of like a leeway year to allow people to get armies painted and get more releases out there for people to actually paint. But like for CCBB next year, that'll be a year away almost from now, like 2 years or a year and a half into the life cycle of the game. Like, come on, like at that point, you should be able to get at least 3 colors and some basing done on your miniatures, right?
Fair. I can see that. Andrew, sorry, Ryan, what's your take on the painting standard?
So I think this is the right timing and appropriate type of event to be rolling it out. Much like Andrew's kind of point there is, I think, we're 8 months in. The people, like, there's enough people interested in coming to this event that there wouldn't be that anyone who is excluded by not having a painted army is easily replaced by another paying customer willing to come to this event.
Fair. Yeah.
But I'm also generally of the opinion that, like, RTTs shouldn't have a painting standard so that people can try stuff,
Mhm.
and big multi-day events should have a painting standard because that's kind of the show-offy hobby type event that goes across like any game system I've ever been involved in for
Fair.
basically the last 10 years. Additionally, like, I have chosen to make my life difficult with painting. Like, as Andrew said, I could have painted my army not yellow and red quartered Bretonian freaking nonsense.
Sure.
And been a lot easier. But the other thing that I do appreciate this, and I know I'm down to a deadline, is I have. It is highly probable that I have ADHD, and without a deadline, I can't finish projects. So having
Yeah.
an event like this that actually says you must paint means I will paint and have the motivation to paint.
Fair. And I think you're not the only guy like that. I've heard that often, like in online commentary and stuff. People being like, if you don't force me to get it painted, it's going to take a while. So yeah.
Yeah, no, because like I enjoy the act of painting, but not so much that I can just like bash out an army without a cause to do it.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I mean, like, it's your hobby at the end of the day. If like that's how things work out for you, then great. Like we're all different on that front.
Yeah.
Okay. So staying with you, Ryan, that wasn't nearly as contentious as I thought it would be. So, fair. What are your thoughts on the doing away with the whole terrain picking system in the core rulebook and going with set boards, as well as the whole vetoing system that's used by Rob Symes at his Old World events in the UK? Like, how do you see that?
So I'm going to preface this with the fact that I am a huge fan of fixed layouts and also not a huge fan of symmetry.
Okay.
So weirdly, what Val and company have accomplished here kind of makes me happy because by using Andrew's terrain, they were forced to make asymmetrical terrain layouts.
Yeah.
I'm not. No, with that said, I'm not the biggest fan of the like have 3 veto 1 pick from the remaining 2 like mini game, because looking at the 3 options, it's really like basically one player is just choosing, do both players get a hill? Like,
Yeah.
that's the only choice that they're making with these terrain layouts. So that's not a flaw of the system as much as it's a flaw of the
The actual
specific
layouts.
terrain layout and the system we are given. Additionally, only one of the 3 terrain layouts actually has any meaningful line of sight blocking action on the table
Mhm.
from the 3 normal layouts. And I won't even go into my opinion on the layout that has a low linear obstacle on top of a hill and all of the terrain clustered together.
In the middle, yeah.
Yeah, that was just okay. But no, like, in concept I like it, but honestly, And again, this is probably not even good for competitive play, but I'm just old enough that I actually had no problem with showing up and having every table just having terrain on it that kind of like at Danny's CTC, like just kind of vibe level terrain of roughly fair-ish nature strewn on the table, but every table is not necessarily the same, so that there's a meaningful choice in choosing table sides and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's apparently not what people want to do, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified it. There's like three sort of ways to do this. It's either the sort of the system that we're seeing at this event where you've got set layouts and you pick out of them. It's either the core rule book, player place terrain, or what we saw at CTC, which is each table shows up with its terrain and you sort of deal with it when you get there. So those are like the three ways of doing it, I think. But I'm curious as like our TO, how do you see Andrew the setup of terrain here being set and picking rather than the player placed?
I think it's fine if that's what they want to do for their event. Personally, I think I still prefer the player place because it allows the players themselves to have a bit of agency on how the table is going to be set up. That being said, I don't think this is a bad way of doing it. And like my one criticism might be that we're already on a tight schedule. So like how much longer is this going to take if they're rearranging the table? But I guess the counter argument to that would also be, well, if you're doing player place terrain anyway, like that's still
Yeah.
a time sink. So honestly, I don't have one strong. Like I like it. I don't think it's a bad way of doing things, and I do enjoy that it standardizes all the placements on the tables for everybody within like one of three options, obviously. But it I guess it evens the playing field even more in terms of like table setup because I do know like at CCBB there were a few issues with maybe some misunderstandings on how player placed is done, and that ended up in some weird terrain layouts that probably, well, according to the rules, wouldn't have been allowed, but the players missed the part about like how where pieces can be placed, and it did have an effect on the one game in specific that I'm kind of partially referencing here. So, like, I think this is fine, and I think it's a very neat and clean way to do terrain placement on a table, unless the TO just goes around and like presets it.
And to interject too, from our experience, how many times is this mini game gonna turn up in the first round of a day, and then 2/3 of the tables are gonna walk up to the table, look at their opponent, and say, "You good with where the terrain is? Yeah, okay."
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
only the
yeah.
top third
You're right. I
that are
forgot all
gonna
about
fuss
that.
about that.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a few edge cases where I think it will matter, but yeah, I think generally people are not too fussy about it. Our local events have all generally been player place terrain except for CTC. I can see arguments for or against it. Like as Ryan has said, especially as you've said in the past, Ryan. Sorry, like it creates a situation where the mini game becomes he who cares the most or is the better at placing terrain gets an advantage for the game, which I can see. But on the other hand, I enjoy as the player having as much agency as possible. So if you asked me, I think I would prefer going with the player place terrain, but I'm not like super fussed about it either way. I think, funnily, predetermined terrain actually gives the much maligned Green Knight an advantage on this one. You know how the one of your best tools to handle that specific piece is to place terrain in a way that's kind of not going to set up easy charges for the Knight when it pops on. So I guess you kind of lose that option when you've got to pick set terrain maps. Looking at the options, I mean, map number 2 there of the regular map. For instance, there's the guy or the individual who's on the bottom half, of that image has a pretty rough go against the Green Knight because he's got 2 places it can spawn inside their deployment zone. So that's a bit of bit of a bummer. So make sure you ban that one map if you're playing the Green Knight. But yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on it. I'm not too fussed about it overall. Moving on to victory point changes. So two things have been added to this event, as far as I could tell. So first of all, monsters are going to give up 25% of their victory points for being brought to below their a quarter of their starting health at the end of the game. I know that in some places they already play it like that, but we generally have not played it like that here locally. And then the second big item is T6 and up monsters will give an extra 50 victory points at the end of the game when they're killed. Andrew, how do you see those scoring changes?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. One, I think it's interesting way to sort of make taking large monsters more of a, I don't know if the word is proper, but risk, as you know, before like even in your case or in my case with my like near unkillable black dragon, I'm very I throw him away very recklessly because I know he's probably not going to die. Yeah, he might take a wound or two, but like by the end of the game, he's still going to be on the table holding all of his points. So now that's going to change how I play with that model because it's like, well, I don't want him to get below that 25%. I mean, you with your crazy trains, I think you're kind of in the same boat there. So I don't 100% hate it. Although I'm also not a fan.
Affected.
They're not affected. Oh, because
they're heavy chariots.
Yeah,
that's bullshit. This game, I'm dropping. Tournament's over.
Iron Demons, let's go.
Brutal. I didn't even think of that. So there's another example of what I'm about to say is I don't really like mucking about with the main rules of the game for a tournament. So like I was very critical of like the Nova comp because they were veering very far away from list building in Old World. Yeah, in a way that just made it seem like it was more of an agenda on the TO. And it's kind of the same story here, where I think they're trying to compensate for these big monsters and things. But it's not nuanced enough to deal with all the edge cases. So, like I just found out right now, the Iron Demon seems like it would be something perfect for this rule to apply to, and because it's a chariot and not a monster, it won't affect it. So that just makes the trains even better and monsters less. I feel like, yeah, it's fine for their event if that's how they want to do it. And I signed up for this event knowing that, so that's a conscientious choice on my part. But again, I'm not a fan of changing like core rules like this of the game, especially if it's trying to compensate for perceived, problem units and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're probably gonna hear some similar thoughts from the two of us. But Ryan, what's your take on the points changes?
So I've got 4 points. My first one, and you're going to hear this repeatedly throughout the rest of the episode, but this is comp disguised as not being comp. These changes specific to the event and changes we'll discuss later literally forced me to completely reconsider how I built my army, which is literally the point of composition restrictions.
Yeah.
So there's that. So the monsters giving up 25 VP thing, I swear to God, like, not gonna lie, from like a game perspective, it sounds like a good idea and probably ought to be what the rule should be.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not what the rule is, and it's actually funny because it honestly just looks like Val and Rob doubling down on a mistake they made in an episode of Square Based and just deciding that's what the rule should be, because that's what they thought the rule was in the episode.
Yeah.
The T6 plus monsters thing, people who have T6 plus monsters, especially multiple of them, are going to have to pay very close attention to the wording when they talk to their opponents, because no matter how many T6 plus monsters you kill, you actually only get 50 victory points. The way they wrote it in the pack. It's if one or more enemy monsters with T6 or higher is slain, you get 50 points.
Okay.
So it's a one-off 50-point bonus, which technically wouldn't even, like, unless your math is like real interesting, wouldn't even swing a scoring bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think that'll have a huge impact necessarily, but it is like a cool incentive to like go hunt the monster or whatever. And then the other point is there is actually one more victory point change, but it's very specific to just the Green Knight.
Yes,
Which
you're
is
right.
that if the Green Knight dies and returns to the table, he still gives up 69 points or 25% of his points cost, where normally he would give up none of his points cost unless he was dead.
Yeah.
So that's that. Like, I have no problem. Like, I agree with Andrew that, like, I am not a fan of shaping the game by tweaking the rules. But if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do, and those are the conceits that we'll play within. But with that said, I don't think any of these three changes are going to change the actual outcome of the event significantly, other than the fact that people like me did change the content of their list based on these and other decisions that were made by the TOs.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to echo some of your points here, Ryan. Like, I don't feel as much as the two of you, like, as strongly as the two of you. But what I will say is, frankly, I don't think these changes are going to amount to too much as far as the scoring itself goes. Missions and other stuff later we can discuss, but I don't think like they'll amount to too much. I think it's a bit more of a win more change than anything else, because if you're packing a 600 plus point Chaos Lord on Dragon that forces you to reroll your sixes, has a 3+ 5 up save situation going, T6, etc. Like, that thing's not dying regardless. So in most games, and then if it's dying, hello, you're already losing that game, and that 50 VP bonus is not actually going to change much. So I don't really see that part swinging the results too much as far as scoring goes. The 25% thing, I'm also not too worried about. Like, I think there's few games where I've left Tomb King on Bone Dragon alive on like one wound at the end of the game. I mean, it could happen, and that would result in like 100-point swing, but like, I don't think it's a super common occurrence either. Like, I understand what the TO is trying to do here in addressing a perceived or probably existing issue with high toughness monster, especially mounts. However, I feel that ultimately this is not an issue for TOs to handle. This is an issue for the game studio to address. And I've said this to both of you in private before. But what this game needs the most right now is not a change to the rules. It's not, comp for how you build your lists. I think it's a good old points adjustment. I mentioned at the start of this episode that 42, there was 42 instances of the Ruby Ring and the Talisman of Protection showing up out of 50 plus lists, which, goes to show that those things are definitely undercosted, for instance. Same thing with monstrous character mounts. I mean, if you readjust the points on a lot of these things, suddenly the incidence of 3+, 5+, 5+ monsters is going to drop, and they'll stop being so dominant in the meta. There's really, I think, more of an internal balance for inside the armies, points-wise problem than there is anything else. So, good on the TO, for trying to address it. But I guess my long-winded take is this is not an issue which TOs should be addressing. This is something which game designers should be addressing. Any thoughts on that?
That's just the perennial, like, this hobby forever has had the people think the game designers won't address it, so they decide they have to address it. And then we wind up with balkanizing tournament formats until the game designers do address it, and then people are happy until they're not. Repeat cycle forever.
Sure. Yes, I guess. Yeah, fair. No additional comments to that. Okay, so let's talk next about another issue which I think is contentious in this panel, at least. The FAQ that was provided with the tournament pack. So kicking this ball right back to you there, Ryan. What are your thoughts on the FAQ?
Boy, do I have feelings. Firstly, again, comp without stating its comp. Like, there are a lot of things in here that clarify stuff, which is handy. Like, sometimes it's just restating a rule so that people who aren't necessarily native English speakers or super familiar with British rule verbiage, can understand what things mean. Because common parlance is different between North America and the UK, and even between us and the Americans.
Sure.
So I get that. But then there's also just like the odd, I think the rule should work this way despite all evidence to the contrary. Or I think the rule works this way despite how math works at a grade like 3 freaking level.
Sure.
Yeah. Everywhere in the world, bedmass, except Warhammer, add first, then multiply.
Fair.
Which is also never how Warhammer has worked, which is why Power Fists were strength 9 for 20 years.
Yeah.
But not to get too ranty. Anyway, like, I appreciate what the intent of the FAQ was there for, and like 85% of it is exactly that. It's just clearing up the edge cases so that the TO doesn't have to answer questions about, like, what's the center of a skirmishing unit? Or can I resurrect models in skirmishing units? Because if you just read the rule book, that's like dividing by 0.
Yeah.
But then sometimes there's just things in there that are like, I just decided this rule works this way because I feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably more because I was asked to make a decision on this one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll
But-
let you finish.
What I was getting at is like, there is the option to just say, as a TO, I think this is clear enough.
Yeah.
Like, restraint is the better part of discretion. But again, like, it's all helpful. It will all work. But at the same time, like, I'm not pulling out this Excel document on my phone
Exactly.
in the middle of a game to solve a rules question. So unless my opponent has it memorized, half this shit's probably never going to come up.
Exactly. And I guess that's like my take on it is like overall I'm pretty lukewarm to this. I played in the SBOT online, the first one where this fact was in effect, and basically none of it ever came up in my games, or like maybe one item at one time, but like it was not super impactful. I guess the getting back to your point there of the Excel format of it. I mean, I think the FAQ is probably too comprehensive for the average player, and I'm seeing it more as like a tool for the judge, frankly, rather than anything else. For my part, I'm not going to be memorizing all of the questions and answers on the FAQ. If we can't, we're going to look it up as far like, and how all my games have worked out is, you look it up with your opponent. If you can't find an answer quickly, you ask a judge, and then I'm going to abide by that ruling, regardless, fact notwithstanding, because that's the judge's ruling, and it's kind of the right thing to do from my perspective. So, I mean, thanks. I appreciate the effort that has gone into the fact, but I'm not overly, I'm not overly bothered because I don't think it's actually gonna warrant. It's not gonna come up as often and warrant the effort that's been place into it probably. What about you, Andrew? I think you're muted there, buddy.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it either. Again, going back to what I said earlier, like I'd rather play as pure to the rulebook and the official FAQs as possible, and I'm not a fan of TOs sort of mucking about with the main rules, especially when, as sort of touched on, it feels like some of this is a bit agenda driven. But again, it's their event; they can do what they want. I feel though that not a lot of people are going to either A, read this, or B, memorize every instance laid out in this FAQ. So even like how often is it going to come up in game, even if the instances being FAQ'd here do come up, I think players are probably more likely to just figure it out themselves or end up asking the TO. So like this probably should have just stayed as like an internal document for the TOs to use as like a tool to help answer those questions when they arrive, as opposed to this being put out to the public and sort of changing the way the game plays. So yeah, I'm not a fan, but like again, it's their event; they can do what they want.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's disputing that. Like we're all cool with it. We're all signed up, but I think you definitely bring some good points to the table, and it's probably, the fact that it's been put out to the public is likely a result of the fact that it was written for SBOT online, where there were no judges. It was just sort of the two players, bashing out the answers to any questions by themselves mid game. So. And then when they had the FAQ already in hand, it just sort of, kept going with it. Is probably my take on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to our last big segment there, the mission pack itself. So there are some changes to the mission pack from the core rulebook here. We're definitely not playing core rulebook missions. So I'll start by listing off the missions that we'll be playing, and then some of the relevant changes, and then we can go into how we're feeling about it. So, cycling down here on my tournament pack. So we'll be playing open battle for round 1, mountain pass for round 2, open battle again for round 3, command and control for round 4, and then another variation of open battle for round 5. So 3 open battles, command and control, and then finally mountain pass. So no changes to the regular open battle scenario. Mountain pass, the only change is that it will be a 6-round, 6-turn essentially game, or until one side concedes, to sort of bring it in line with the other missions, which is fine. As far as I'm concerned, round 3 is open battle with Vanguard deployment, though. So that's all the rules of Vanguard deployment have been pulled out and replaced by the open battle rules. Round 4, command and control. So the only modification on this one is that instead of having a tower in the middle, it's going to be replaced by a hill. And then lastly, for round 5, open battle again. That one is with the breakpoint deployment. And so again, all the rules of breakpoint have been pulled out, and they've been replaced with open battle. So I think that leaves us with that, coupled with the terrain changes, a pretty different set of missions than we normally see at an event. So going around the table there, what are your thoughts on it, Ryan?
I appreciate a lot of it. Like I like deployment variety, which is great. I also like mission variety to an extent, but as we've discussed at length before, like the missions for this game are not amazing. So this is kind of a cool compromise option. As a Bretonian player, I greatly appreciate the let's deploy 12 inches away from each other diagonal activity.
Turn 1 charges, yeah.
I mean, I like turn 1 charges. I'm already pulling off, but yeah, it's just a great. Command and control is, as far as I can tell, the same way that Andrew's been doing it here in Ottawa.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, like breakpoint deployment, I'm happy to use some portion of breakpoint because that mission is also not playable in a differential format.
Yeah. Fair.
But so starting 18 inches away and like having kind of the narrower gaps, like I appreciate what they're doing with this. I think eventually we will evolve to greater variety because fundamentally we're just playing the same mission 4 times but
Yep.
with different shapes.
Yep.
And that mission is run forward and slap each other to death. So but that's not, and it's not the TO's fault. It's just the game is go to the middle and slap each other to death. That's what the game is.
Yeah.
So
Fair. No, I think I agree with that. But what are your thoughts, Andrew?
I mostly agree too. Choosing Vanguard deployment though seems a little risky. Being a foot away for deployment. I think we tried that once here. Like way back when the game first came out, when I started running RTTs, and it was kind of like the fastest game of Warhammer ever because basically it was just a bunch of turn 1 and 2 charges and then that's it.
Yeah.
Like, I find it weird that they chose to do that, especially because they are also sort of veteran players and probably would have noticed the inherent flaw in that, especially because I mean, I guess you can deploy like further back, but I feel like most people are just gonna line deploy and then just whoever rolls to go first is gonna have a really good game.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, like I'm fine. Again, like there isn't that many viable missions to go with anyway for tournaments. Like modified command and control is good, and really it's not modified. It's just defining what you know your centerpiece is gonna be. Because I think command and control doesn't even say it has to be a tower. It's just a terrain feature. So they're just defining that before the actual game starts, which is fine. Normally, you just decide that with your opponent, like a one-off fun game, right?
Mhm.
So I don't think like these aren't crazy big changes, and it doesn't affect the way the tournament's gonna go or probably anyone's like list selection or anything. So I'm kind of fine with this. I mean,
Sure.
we've for CCBB, we modified what 2 or 3 of the missions.
Yeah.
So I think I'm more okay with TOs mucking about with mission design as opposed to changing like rules and making personal FAQs. I don't know
Fair.
why that is, but just in my head, like that's less taboo to me than the other thing.
Yeah.
Even command and control, like I feel, or the one with the banners, I feel could be modified in some way to make it more tournament viable, as opposed to just you lose when you go below your breakpoint or whatever.
Sure.
Um,
And
but
we have
that
changed it in the past, right, to run it. So
oh
have
no, we
we? I don't
ran
think we
it and
did.
then no one knew how to score it.
okay.
Yeah, because it was like, well, yeah, that was
Anyway.
the mess.
That was that first event that Dan put on.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right, I was
So
there. Yeah.
yeah. So on my end, I mean, I'm generally positive about the changes. Also, I mean, they're basically all open in battle except for one command and control mission, which is also kind of open battle with an extra 200 or whatever victory points thrown into the mix. I don't know that the other missions are problematic enough that you need to write them off. And then I would say if you're just going to go with basically open battle, why not like throw a crazy new deployment style into the mix? Like, I don't know, you each get a table quarter or something different.
Flames of War dust up.
Sure, yeah, whatever, right? And then I think the changes to command and control specifically are excellent. Like the game, and you should always play it with a hill rather than a tower or some other unpassable piece of terrain, just because it makes the game much more dynamic and engaging. So yeah, I'm fully on board with that one. So that covers terrain. I guess the only thing before we sort of start closing out there, I want to ask you guys about is thinking about how terrain terrain deployment is different at this tournament. Missions are different. Scoring is different. Do you think that when you take all of that together, you're going to see a big shift in results and placings and who's winning and who's not winning, or do you think that when you, despite combining all of this together, it's still pretty minor stuff overall? Let's start with you, Andrew.
I don't think it's going to affect the outcomes in any significant way. Like you said before, the 50 points for killing a monster, it's not going to even change your bracket level, so like it's kind of a nothing. Maybe the 25% thing will have a bigger effect on games, but I just don't think it's going to be that big of a shift in like overall scores. And then the mission structure, like it's basically just open battle. So again, you're like, sure, we're deploying differently, but it's still the same mission. So there's no big changes there. And then even with like the FAQ, like you even said like a lot of this stuff is like super niche edge cases. So like how often that's going to even affect the outcome of a game if it's even used. Like it's I think this is all just minor stuff.
Agreed.
And I guess that's what's kind of shaped my, overall I keep saying like, oh, I don't like tournament organizers mucking about with the rules that much, but I'm still going to this event. It's because all these changes are like so minuscule, like it really won't change the way we're going to be playing Warhammer that weekend, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Andrew. Like more or less, I think yes and no, it will impact the overall results. Like there's probably going to be some slight shifts based on all these changes, and it might even tip a few games over the course of the weekend. But broadly speaking, I think those armies that were going to win under the core rulebook construct are probably still going to be winning their games under this tournament pack, and you're probably not going to see a massive shift there. What about you, Ryan? When you take all this together, like, do you see it shifting the results?
So I agree with all the points you guys have made. I realized there's actually one other part of the tournament pack we didn't discuss that I actually do think will change the result of the event.
Oh, go
And
ahead.
that is the differential scoring using 300-point brackets.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I totally forgot.
So,
I did have that originally, but I forgot after. So yeah, kick us off.
so to get a 20-0, you need to win by 1,900 or more points in a 2,000-point game.
So it's never going to happen, basically.
Which is 400 more points than you needed to get a 20-0 at CCBB.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. And again, I don't think any of the changes found in this event are going to change who will win a game, but changing to what degree you win that game when you have multiple people that are undefeated and you're trying to figure out who won the most is interesting, because a lot of the like winning year results from CCBB aren't going to be 20-0s anymore. They'd drop down to like 17-3s. So anyway, I think that will be an interesting change where more of the event scores will be in the 14-6 to 17-3 score bracket.
Yep,
instead of the 16-4 to 20-0 bracket.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it'll result in a lot more closer scores in terms of differential when you score it that way than it did at CCBB or the other events that we run here, for sure. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Andrew?
maybe I'm stupid, but wouldn't that just shift all the scores down?
It would.
So it would make no difference?
Yeah, you're
Right?
correct. Except, yeah, you're essentially
Unless
correct.
I'm not seeing something like, okay, at CCBB, there were some like there was quite a few like 19 ones, 20 O's, 18 twos. But let's say those same scores happened at SBOT, wouldn't it just be the same but lower scores overall?
So
Uh,
the biggest difference is that anyone at CCBB that scored a 20-0 is getting somewhere between an 18-2 and a 20-0 at this event.
Yeah.
So yes, it will skew overall scores lower, but that does mean that exactly what bracket you fall into matters more than just I got to get more 20-0s than other people do.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and I
Well,
think like the way the differential is done here, it essentially makes it impossible to have a 20-0, a 19-1. 18-2 is also like very difficult to achieve. So probably best case scenario, and like you're talking a pretty serious drubbing here, is like 17-3. But again, that's a really bad game for somebody that was really run one way. So I think it just sort of restricts the scores you're going to see. And I guess it also interestingly makes because the only one that has a smaller bracket is the draw. So you're not going to see a lot of draws, like a 100 point, like 99 point differential. So I think everybody will sort of be between 15-5 and 11-9 in almost
Now,
all
now
cases.
another interesting point on that is that the event your battle points, like those differential points, only matter to the final of the event. So
Yeah.
pairings every round are win loss aggregate,
Yeah.
followed by win path, and then randomly assigned amongst that bracket of people. Which is something that was very common or started being very common like 3-4 years ago in competitive 40K. And then the final event placings are win, loss, draw, ties broken by battle points, followed by your strength of schedule if required.
Yeah.
So while like it's actually interesting that I just made so much of a deal out of differential when actually
It's not
looking
going to
at it,
matter. Yeah.
it literally will not matter if you can just win more.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like it doesn't you could win all of your game, you could win all 5 games 11-9, but if you're the only guy that wins 5 games, you just win.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sure. So in the
it's
end,
But
yeah, you're right. Won't be a huge deal.
yeah. It's just
Okay.
different. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Okay, so before we sign off, let's do something fun. Who do you guys think is going to win the event? And I don't mean like you don't need to pick an individual player here, obviously, but like any faction you guys predict is going to take it. Let's start with Andrew.
well, I got to play the odds game and just say Warriors of Chaos then.
Fair. Or High Elves, they have the same odds technically.
No, they're Hiles of trash.
Fair. Okay, what about you? So we've got Warriors of Chaos. What about you, Ryan?
Just out of spite, I'm giving it to the Slayer army. Just because I don't know if people will figure out how to deal with 1,000 points of if you kill them, you don't get their points.
Sure.
That's why
Yeah.
I think it's gonna do good.
I mean, yeah, I hope he wins. Let me put it that way. That would be amazing.
But at the same time, you like breathe on those bricks of Slayers and they just die.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, as I mentioned before, he doesn't run into a shooting less because that'll be difficult. But
Or
okay,
30
so
feet guard.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so we got Warriors of Chaos, and then we got Dwarves from Ryan. So I'm gonna go with Warriors of Chaos. Also, I think they're taking the cake on this one. So I think the strength of the field is a good one, is an important point. So they got a lot of lists showing up, and I think a lot of their lists are come into play with a Chaos Dragon Lord, souped up Mark of Tzeentch level forecasters, a bunch of Forsaken, a ton of Dragon Ogres, as we've discussed. Like those are some scary lists. So I'm definitely going with Warriors of Chaos on this one. So I got 2 Warriors of Chaos and 1 Dwarf for our predictions. So yeah, okay. So this brings us to conclusion of the episode. So before we head off, anything you want to shout out, Ryan?
Val, I love you, and I'm sorry that I was so fussy about your event format.
Yeah, I'm sure he will take it all in stride. Awesome. What about you, Andrew? Anything you want to shout out?
No, I'm good.
Awesome.
I don't really got much to shout out.
Fair. Like, I think I could speak for all of us. Like, we're super excited, looking forward to going out and slamming dice in Toronto this weekend. Our next episode will undoubtedly be a recap of how the event went and how things shook out. Did our predictions pan out? Did we all get 0-5'd and do terribly? Who won the wooden spoon? Like, we'll be discussing all of that kind of stuff. And then after that, probably we're going to be talking about the team tournament that we were supposed to be discussing this episode, but which we didn't. So that's it for us. It's been episode 5 of the Motley Crue podcast. I hope you've enjoyed. Let us know what you're thinking, what you thought, if you enjoyed the episode, and see you all next time.
Bye.